Okay, picture this. It is the middle of the Cold War. Nuclear drills in American schools. Spies trade secrets under dim streetlights. You got rockets punching holes in the upper atmosphere. And on paper, the biggest question on every general's mind is who gets to space first? Who gets better missiles? Who blinks in the staring contest that could end the world? But what if, off the books, the real contest was not East versus West? It was Earth versus everyone else. Welcome back to Broadcasting Seeds. I'm your host, Bennett Tanton, and today we are walking straight into one of the strangest what-ifs in UFO lore. A story that looks like science fiction, reads like a classified Apollo mission, and somehow refuses to die, even after decades of debunking attempts and internet drama. This episode is about Project SERPO, the alleged alien exchange program. According to the story, buried somewhere in the deep black budget world of American intelligence, there was once a deal. Not a treaty with Moscow, not some handshake with NATO, a deal between the United States government and a non-human civilization said to be from the Zeta Reticuli star system, a real binary star about 39 light years away in the constellation Reticulum. If that name rings a bell, it should. Zeta Reticuli is the same system that got tied to the famous Betty and Barney Hill abduction case from 1961. After Betty drew a strange star map under hypnosis and an amateur astronomer later argued it matched that specific star pair. That incident became known as the Zeta Reticuli incident, and it helped cement that star system in UFO legend long before anybody ever whispered the word SERPO. Fast forward a few years, and the SERPO story says something even wilder happened. According to leaked briefing documents and anonymous insiders, an alien craft landed at a secure U.S. facility in the mid-1960s. A group of 12, count them, 12 American military specialists supposedly volunteered for what amounted to a one-way deployment. No return date. No guarantee that they will ever see Earth again. Their destination, an alien world orbiting those twin suns. The story claims they trained for years, learned basic alien symbols. They got poked, they got scanned, and conditioned for low gravity and strange radiation. Then, somewhere around 1965, they boarded a non-human craft and left Earth behind. For 13 years, those 12 allegedly lived on another planet, tried to understand an alien society, and kept records of their daily life so that if they ever came home, somebody in a windowless room in Washington could read about it and quietly decide what to do with the truth. On the surface, it just sounds ridiculous, and it should. It has all the ingredients of a late-night cable movie, a secret team, an alien world, a mission that starts with a handshake and ends with missing people, and classified medical reports. But here's why this one will not go away. During the exact same Cold War period, our government really did run programs that sound like bad sci-fi. The Stargate project, for example, was a real declassified Army and DIA effort that tried to use remote viewing and other psychic techniques to gather intelligence. Their own paperwork describes parapsychological interactions and human experiments that went on for years before being shut down in the 90s and later exposed through FOIA. So, When the SERPO material started appearing publicly in the early 2000s, it attached itself to a very real pattern. Weird black projects, hidden budgets, things that sound insane until 30 years later, you find the PDF stamped formerly classified sitting on the CIA website like it was nothing. That is the tension we are going to live in this episode. On one side, you have serious problems with the SERPO story. One of the early alleged insiders, Richard Doty, has a long history of being tied to UFO disinformation and admitted psychological games. Researchers have pointed out contradictions in the timelines, physics, issues with the travel, and the complete lack of hard evidence. On the other side, there is this haunting question that will not leave the room. If governments are willing to sponsor psychic spy units, silence pilots, and bury military UFO encounters in classified filing cabinets, how far would they really be willing to go if a non-human civilization offered an invitation? In this episode of Broadcasting Seeds, we are going to treat Project SERPO like what it is. It's a collision point between documented Cold War strangeness and an unverified but incredibly persistent story about human beings living off-world. Here's how it's going to break down. Section 1 will walk you through the origin story of SERPO. Where did this claim even come from? Who pushed it into the public, and how does it connect back to Roswell and Betty and Barney Hill case? 2, we'll zoom in on the 12 volunteers, what the alleged mission profile says about their training, the journey, and life on an alien planet. We will compare that to real Apollo-era astronaut protocols and ask what if it would actually take to send a human team that far from home. And then 3, we'll tackle the big one, disclosure or disinformation. Is SERPO a breadcrumb trail meant to soften us up for slow drip disclosure? Or is it a psychological operation built out of half-truths, hoaxes, and just enough reality to hook people like us? Along the way, we will look at real documents, real programs, and real historical context, and then set it side by side with this wild exchange program narrative. You do not have to believe SERPO is real to get something out of this. The question underneath it is bigger. What does it do to a society if the people in charge of truth are caught lying again and again, especially about what might be sharing the universe with us? So before we jump in, quick reminder. If you get value out of Broadcasting Seeds, the best way that you can support the show is to like, share, and leave a review wherever you're listening. That is how this thing grows. That is how more people find these conversations. That is how we keep pulling on threads like this without someone else deciding the narrative for you. All right. Buckle up, grab your tinfoil passport, and imagine what it would feel like to step onto a craft that does not belong to us, knowing you might not see Earth again. Section 1. From Roswell to Zeta Reticuli, the roots of the SERPO mythos. Let's rewind the tape back to 1961. A quiet September night in rural New Hampshire, a couple by the names of Betty Hill and Barney Hill were driving home after a road trip when they claimed to see a strange, glowing object descending in the sky. What followed, lost time, terrified memories, and long-lasting trauma would echo across decades and help birth what many today call modern alien abduction lore. Under hypnosis, Betty drew a crude star map, one that she insisted she saw aboard the craft. Years later, an amateur astronomer named Marjorie Fish tried to match that map to real stars. After painstaking analysis, she concluded the most likely candidate was the binary star system Zeta Reticuli, and it's about 39 light years away. That link, Hill, Fish, Zeta Reticuli, did more than give sci-fi writers a stellar address. It gave UFO enthusiasts, conspiracy theorists, and late-night podcast hosts a framework. Suddenly, alien abduction wasn't just a shadowy memory or a wild story. It had actual coordinates. Here's the twist. By the early 1970s and 1980s, skepticism mounted. Astronomers and critics argued that the star map was almost certainly a random clustering of points, not a navigable, can never say that word, route around the cosmos. One skeptic famously demonstrated that once you remove the connecting lines drawn by Betty or interpreted by Fish, the map lost its resemblance to any known star chart. So this tension, vivid testimony versus astrophysical rebuttal, created fertile ground for speculation. And in that fertile ground, the story of Project SERPO found its roots. According to its proponents, the U.S. government didn't just catalog UFO sightings. It turned contact into an exchange. Allegedly, in the 1960s, 12 Americans, our first interstellar envoys, boarded an alien ship and journeyed to a world circling Zeta Reticuli. There, they were meant to learn, to observe, to serve as Earth's silent ambassadors. Why did SERPO narrative attach itself so cleanly to Hill and the Zeta saga? Because it fills the gaps. The Hill incident raised the possibility of alien visitation, and Zeta Reticuli gave a destination. SERPO gave a mission. And in the world where real Cold War secrecy was already hiding programs of staggering weirdness, the leap from "we saw strange lights" to "we made a cosmic deal," while audacious, felt just plausible enough. Here's the real kicker. The same period that birthed the Hill incident and the Zeta Reticuli discussion is also the era when our own governments were exploring the limits of the mind. Programs like the Stargate project, real to classified, tried to weaponize psychic phenomena, remote viewing, clairvoyance, extrasensory perception. The idea that the U.S. was secretly messing with human consciousness for intelligence gathering is not fringe, it's documented. So by the time the documents claiming SERPO existed were whispered into public forums decades later, the audience was already just primed. A society already shaken by covert government mental spy programs, an abduction case that introduced the possibility of alien contact in a star system that allegedly checked out. That, more than anything, is how legends are born, not just on paper, but deep in our cultural identity. In other words, SERPO didn't emerge in a vacuum. It grew out of dense, volatile mix of anxiety, belief, secrecy, and hope. And in the next section, we'll dig into the heart of those claims to meet the 12 Americans who supposedly boarded that alien craft and ask, Earth even sign them back in if they ever returned. Section 2. Classified astronauts, the 12 volunteers. Okay, imagine being chosen, not for a covert spy mission, but for something far more foreign, enlisting to become humanity's first ambassadors to an alien world. That's what the story of Project SERPO claims. Happened in the mid-1960s. You had 12 Americans handpicked, prepped, and sent to live on an alien planet. Let's roll the alleged mission logs together and examine what they would have looked like and what problems jump out when you compare them to what we know of real history. The alleged volunteers, who they were. So, according to SERPO lore, the group consisted of 12 U.S. military or defense intelligence personnel. Some versions of the story say 10 men and 2 women. Their mission, to travel to an extrasolar planet, SERPO, orbiting the binary star system Zeta Reticuli, and live as part of a long-term exchange, learn the alien language, observe their society, and then report back. Supposedly, these individuals underwent extensive preparation, cultural training, like symbol language, basics of alien psychology, medical screening, which included radiation exposure and low gravity environment, psychological evaluation, long duration isolation, alien flora and fauna, their diet, and even geographic simulated training for otherworld terrain. Some versions of the documents referred to crew manifests, pre-deployment conditioning, and alien language primers described among the selected humans. Then, in 1965, the boarding supposedly happened. The 12 entered a non-human craft at a secure facility somewhere in the U.S., silent, blackout corridors, stripped paperwork, sealed airlocks. If true, that would be the most ambitious exchange program in human history, not just across nations, but across worlds. The journey alleged faster than light or unknown physics. So, one of the most eyebrow-raising claims, despite the target being around 39 light years away, the purported alien technology made the trip in just a few months, or in some accounts, a 9-month journey. After arrival, the 12 would have to adapt to unknown gravity, alien atmosphere, and perhaps even different day-night cycles. Radiation exposure, unfamiliar biochemistry, survivability alone raises enormous scientific questions, right? Given our current understanding of space travel, relativistic constraints, and human physiology. Some versions of the story claim that the clock runs differently on SERPO, that 13 Earth years corresponds to 10 SERPO years, presumably due to different orbital characteristics, a convenient detail if you want the numbers to line up for long-term exchange. The return, who came back, who stayed behind. The most telling and chilling part of the tale comes after the alleged mission end. Supposedly, only 8 of the original 12 returned to Earth. And according to the story, 1 died en route on the outbound journey, 1 died on the alien planet, and 2 volunteered to stay behind, adopting the alien life as their own. The 8 who supposedly returned came back drastically changed, physically, psychologically, culturally. Some versions claim the readaptation process was brutal, broke circadian rhythms, alien diet hangovers, language confusion, and a sense of alienation that no psychiatrist or debriefing protocol could fully erase. It's also worth noting, though the story is very juicy, no verifiable documentation ever surfaced. The person who often surfaces as whistleblower, Richard C. Doty, has been widely discredited by UFO researchers for previous involvement in questionable leaks and confirmed disinformation campaigns. By contrast, when we look at genuine secret programs that have since been declassified, we see something very different. Real precedent for Black Ops, Weirdness, the Stargate project. So, in the 1970s and 80s, the U.S. government, specifically the CIA and DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, did in fact explore genuinely strange territory under names like Scannet, Sunstreak, and finally Stargate. They attempted to harness psychic phenomenon, mainly remote viewing or intelligence gathering, which is still, frankly, allegedly used today by people that I know and have even interviewed for intelligence gathering. Eyes closed spies claiming to see Soviet bases or hidden bunkers halfway around the globe. It sounds bizarre, but it is documented, and the files show thousands of pages of internal memos, experiment logs, personal screening, and classified assessments. After decades of investment, the CIA and DIA eventually concluded that remote viewing didn't meet the threshold of reliable intelligence, and by 1995, the project was terminated. But here's the thing. If real government secret projects could include experiments on psychic phenomenon, intangible, controversial, unloved by the mainstream science, then an alleged alien exchange program doesn't feel like total sci-fi fantasy. It lands in a gray zone of maybe possible, but deeply weird. That ambiguity is the space where stories like SERPO thrive. The tension, plausible versus actual evidence. On one hand, 12 volunteers, mission logs, an alien planet, and a homecoming where most never returned. It's cinematic. It's tragic. It's horrifying. And it touches something primal in us. On the other, absolutely zero hard evidence. No verified photos, no physical artifacts, no credible whistleblower testimony that holds up under scrutiny. So researchers who have investigated the story note glaring inconsistencies, changing crew numbers, sometimes 12, sometimes 11, conflicting tales about who died or stayed behind, shifting timelines, lack of a paper trail, and the fact that the only public promoters of the story have strong ties to known disinformation campaigns. That doesn't make the story completely worthless. In fact, that's why it's worth taking or talking about, because as a thought experiment, whether real or not, it reflects a deeper truth that the governments of the 20th century, especially during the Cold War, were willing to explore absolutely absurd, borderline science fiction ideas if they thought it might give them an edge. Psychic spies, secret research into human consciousness, UFO investigations, black budget programs galore. It was all part of the same shadow war. And in that context, Project SERPO, with or without hard evidence, becomes more than a legend. It actually becomes a symbol of what might be possible when secrecy, fear, and ambition collide. Section 3, disclosure or disinformation, what SERPO really means to us. When you step back from the mythology, from the sensational headlines, from the whispered top secret files, the story of Project SERPO forces us to grapple with something way deeper. Maybe the story is true. Maybe it's an elaborate hoax. But either way, what it reveals is not just about aliens. It's about trust, secrecy, and the power of narrative in a society built on classified deals and hush-hush intelligence. Real precedent. Governments have done weird things, and they got caught sometimes. First, let's anchor ourselves in verified fact. During the Cold War and beyond, the U.S. government did actually run classified programs that trespassed far outside what most people would consider normal intelligence work. Project Stargate, for example, we've already gone through this, funded psychic phenomenon experiments, remote viewing, attempts to use mental perception to spy across distance and bypass conventional surveillance. Stargate's aim was not science fiction. It was military advantage. If remote viewing worked, the Soviets could be observed without satellites, bunkers exposed, without boots on the ground, and secrets plucking out of thin air. Yet, when the data was reviewed under scrutiny, the conclusion was brutal. The intelligence gained was unreliable, vague, and never really actionable. The program was canceled all the way in 1995. In other words, yes, the U.S. government has repeatedly experimented with fringe, even bizarre ideas in the name of security. Some of those experiments have been declassified. Some remain buried. That historical reality gives stories like SERPO a strange kind of credibility by association. If they were willing to test psychic spies, why not listen to someone claiming physical alien contact? Why not? If there was even a remote possibility, run a secret exchange program. But there's a second truth. Disinformation. Disinformation is a tool, and it's sometimes weaponized. Because the government did engage in genuinely strange experiments, it created fertile ground for confusion, misdirection, and propaganda. And as recently as 2025, revelations have emerged suggesting some parts of UFO mythology may have been deliberately cultivated to mask secret weapons programs. And according to New Pentagon Review, fake UFO stories and even staged flying saucer photos were spread to distract the public and foreign intelligence from advanced stealth jet development and other classified tech initiatives. That means UFO folklore may not always be the side effect of ignorance. Sometimes it may be the product of purposeful obfuscation, a cloak, or a distraction, a public relations soft war. With that in mind, stories like SERPO don't just represent a wild possibility. They might reflect a tested strategy, the use of extraordinary narratives to hide something far less sensational, but just as powerful, or more so. A Black Ops budget, experimental aircraft, and Psy-Ops. So we have the gray zone and what's real, what's fiction, and who gets to decide. So where does SERPO stand? It lives in a limbo between documented weirdness, like Stargate, and exaggerated claims traveling 39 light years, living on another world for over a decade. On the one hand, there are no confirmed photos, no credible medical reports, no verified return personnel. On the other hand, we know for a fact that for decades, U.S. intelligence community openly funded and later declassified projects that flirted with the bizarre, more than just Stargate. There's plenty of others, and most of you know the names of these. What SERPO forces us to ask is, who decides what counts as plausible? And if a government says we tried psychic spies and decades later admits it, it failed. We accept it because of paperwork, documents, and classification. But if someone claims we sent Americans to an alien world, we scoff because we have no public documents, no photos, no declassified manifests. The result is a deeply asymmetric standard for credibility. What's real when the government admits it, and what's delusional when it relies on leaks, whispers, and anonymous sources. And that matters because credibility is a currency. If enough people believe there's been a cosmic exchange, that belief reshapes culture. It feeds rumors of hidden alien ambassadors. It colors how we interpret UAP sightings today. It fuels demand for disclosure, for transparency, for official answers. What this means for individuals in society, why the SERPO story still matters, is whether SERPO is true or false. Its existence as a widely shared narrative impacts us. And here's how. It challenges trust in institutions. And when people realize history is full of declassified secrets that once sounded insane, they begin to wonder what else is buried, what else matters that we don't know. It fuels existential curiosity. Listening to stories like SERPO makes you look at the stars differently. And suddenly, cosmic questions don't feel distant, but personal. Would you volunteer? What does it say about humanity's place in the universe? It affects public pressure for transparency. And the more these stories circulate, the more people demand unaccountability. If we treat UAP and UFO phenomenon as serious research questions, not fringe rumors, it changes how governments and media respond. It underscores the power of stories, whether real or invented. Narratives like SERPO shape culture. They just do. They shape community, even policy. They keep alive the hope and fear that maybe, just maybe, we aren't alone, or at least that they've already visited. I mean, I can go down the flat earth, but I'm not going there. Not in this episode. So when you hear the name Project SERPO, don't dismiss out of hand. But don't treat it as gospel either. Treat it like, here we go. Treat it like a mirror. A story that reflects our deepest uncertainties, our historical secrets, and the questions we're afraid to ask out loud. Because in the end, whether SERPO is true or myth, the greater question isn't, did they go? It's what happens if we find out we did. What do we do with a story like this? Here we are. We've walked through the roots of the SERPO mythos. We've met the 12 alleged volunteers, sort of, the so-called classified astronauts, and we've wrestled with a big question. Is this disclosure or disinformation? Maybe somewhere in the forgotten archive, the truth is sitting on a shelf under a classification stamp. Maybe a few people on this planet know exactly what happened in the mid-60s, and they'll never talk. Or maybe this whole story is a psychological mirage. a social experiment that got out of its creator's control. A rumor that grew legs and started running. Wouldn't be the first. But I'll tell you what is real. Every time we peel back a layer of history, we find programs that were once mocked, once denied, later revealed to be absolutely real. Remote viewing, psychic spies, declassified, UFO encounters tracked by military systems, publicly acknowledged by the Pentagon, stealth aircraft disguised behind UFO rumors during a Cold War. Confirmed as disinformation. Confirmed. Secrecy isn't the exception, it's the operating system. And that's why stories like SERPO matter. Not because we can prove them, but because they remind us to question the blank spaces. They remind us that our institutions are capable of incredible innovation and incredible deception. And they remind us that if you want the truth, you can't wait for permission. You have to go looking. So here's my challenge to you. Don't decide whether Project SERPO is true or false. Decide what it means if it is. What does a society do when it learns we are not alone? And what some of us already went to make, first contact. What happens when our most dangerous secrets aren't about war, but about who else shares the universe with us? If even a fraction of these stories turn out to be real, our history books aren't just incomplete. They're a cover story. We already think this, so many of us. So thank you for tuning in to Broadcasting Seeds. If you enjoyed tonight's journey into the unknown, if it made you think, made you curious, or made you stare just a little longer at the stars, please like, share, and review wherever you listen. That is how we grow the show, and that is how we make sure these conversations don't disappear into the noise. Again, I'm Bennett Tanton, and until next time, keep your eyes open, your mind sharp, and your curiosity louder than your fear.
stitched together with pain.